speech. May all on the side of negativity, such as the four maras, be stopped. May they become non-existent. May they be pacified. All enemies, obstructors, and hindrances, Shanti Kuruye Soha. The 80,000 types of obstructors pacified, freed from adverse harmful conditions. May all be conducive and perfect auspiciousness. Bring happiness and well-being here, right now. Ground perfume anointed flowers, strewn may prove for lands, sun and moon adorned, seen as Buddha, feared and offered. Thus may all sentient beings enjoy pure lands. Geshe Tsulga Dhampakyenam Kurukulla Yense Trindrine Gitatambe Duje Dinma Ahazab Gecherki Charpavatuso Idam Guru Ratnam Mandalakam Niryatayami Sangye Chodan Soki Chognam La Jangchu Padu Dagni Kyapsuchi Dagi Chunyen Gi Pesonam Gi Drola Penchu Sangye Drupashu Sangye Chodan Soki Chognam La Jangchu Padu Dagni Kyapsuchi Dagi Chunyen Gi Pesonam Gi Drola Penchu Sangye Drupashu Sangye Chodang Soki Chognam La Jangchu Padu Dagni Kyapsuchi Dagi Chunyen Gi Pesonam Gi Drola Penchu Sangye Drupashu.
So let's start with a few minutes meditation on the breath. So sit in your best meditation posture, bring your mind inside, keep it away from distraction of the five senses, and also keep it away from internal distractions, discursive thought and sluggish, sleepy mind. Find your breath where it goes out and comes in through your nostrils. So that's where you're going to focus your concentration and generate a strong determination. Now I'm going to concentrate on my breath without allowing myself to to become distracted by anything whatsoever. So really feel that determination and then focus on your breath for as long as you can. But also be mindful, or also be aware of what you're doing. So that you notice distractions as soon as they arrive, and then just deflect them and keep focusing on your breath. Or if you find somehow your mind has wandered off your breath, drop whatever it was that distracted you and just come straight back to your breath. So if you've done the meditation effectively, your mind should be a little calmer and clearer than it was 5 minutes ago. So look into your mind and check your motivation for being here this morning. So if you find your motivation is just a temporal one, just a motivation seeking simply the happiness or comfort of this life, looking for just an immediate result, then recognize that motivation is coming from attachment, one of the 3 poisonous minds. And that by following that motivation, you'll be creating negative karma, leaving a negative imprint on your consciousness, planting a seed of future suffering on your mind, in your mind. And in that case, determine not to follow that motivation, but to replace it with a positive one. So think, if I follow that motivation of attachment, if I fall prey to the evil thought of the 8 worldly dharmas, I'll be creating the cause of suffering in this life, and worse, rebirth in the lower realms. From where it's very difficult to escape, and where the experience is just relentless and unbearable suffering. So I've been in cyclic existence since beginningless time, mostly in the lower realms. And now that I've achieved not only a human rebirth, but a perfect human rebirth that gives me every opportunity to practice Dharma, there's nothing more foolish than creating the cause to return to the lower realms, by following attachment. So at the very least, I must generate at least the positive motivation of studying and practicing Dharma in order to receive rebirth in the upper realms, especially another human rebirth. But since that's still in cyclic existence, and after that upper rebirth, there's no guarantee that I won't then return to the lower realms. It's better that I generate a higher positive motivation of seeking liberation from the hold of cyclic existence. So that I never have to suffer in any way ever again. But if I do attain freedom and liberation for myself, that doesn't really benefit other sentient beings. From whom all my past, present and future happiness, including that of liberation, come. So to seek perfect peace and happiness for myself alone is actually selfish and cruel. You know, the purpose of my life is to free all sentient beings from suffering. So in order to do that, I have to know how to free them from suffering. And the best way of doing that is by becoming enlightened. So, you know, my reason for being here this morning, for studying and practicing Dharma, is to attain enlightenment. So that I can not only free all sentient beings from suffering, but I can lead them also to enlightenment. So in that way, you know, generate the determination to reach enlightenment for the sake of all sentient beings. You know, the motivation, the highest motivation, the motivation, Mahayana motivation, the motivation we call bodhicitta. So I think, you know, in order to attain enlightenment, I have to actualize the path to enlightenment, the graduated path to enlightenment. And I do that by studying and meditating on the teachings on the path. And that starts with renunciation. Renunciation of suffering, and particularly renunciation of the cause of suffering, ignorance, attachment and aversion. So, you know, therefore I'm going to study Lama Zopa Rinpoche's teachings on how to practice Dharma, how to abandon the 8 worldly Dharmas in order to reach enlightenment for the sake of all sentient beings. So of course we should try to generate bodhicitta for whatever we do in our life, all our actions, 24 hours a day. But especially if we're doing a Dharma action like, you know, studying Dharma or meditating, especially that should be done with bodhicitta. Okay, thanks. So if you've done your homework, which I think last time was to read at least the first 4 chapters of this book, actually the homework is to read the whole book, eventually. Anyway, if you've done, you would have, if you've read I think the first chapter, you see how Lama Zopa Rinpoche talks about how it was only when he read this particular text, when he was up in Laudo, which was where his previous life had lived, he read this text opening the door of Dharma, which had belonged to his previous life, the Laudo Lama. He said only when, I think he was about 25 at that stage, he said that when he read that text he realised that he hadn't been practicing Dharma at all yet. So, you know, as I think I mentioned last week, I don't take that statement literally. I mean, he'd been living in monasteries since he was 3 or thereabouts, so I'm pretty sure he'd been practicing Dharma quite well before he read that text. But anyway, I think it was a message for us. It's important to understand the teachings that were in that text, and the teachings that are in that text are in this book. So I think we're more fortunate than Rinpoche in a way, because we haven't wasted more than 20 years in a monastery not practicing Dharma like he apparently did. So we have this book now, so we can we know how to practice Dharma, how to make our life meaningful right now. So it's an amazing book, really. When I look at it, I just can't believe there's so much material on this, in a way, a small subject. Small in the sense that in Liberation in the Palm of Your Hand, it only takes up like 3 pages. So it's amazing how much Rinpoche's taught about it in different ways over the years. So he's coming at it so many different ways, you know. But everything has the taste of abandoning the 8 worldly dharmas. There's a teaching in the Lamrim, I'm not sure if it's in Liberation in the Palm of Your Hand, but about the radishes. Do you know? Remember? You remember? What's the story?
Well, there are a couple of monks are looking to get a teaching from a great Lama, and as they're walking to where he's supposed to be, they notice in the stream or river, as they're walking along to his place, that there are radish tops floating by, and they see some radish tops floating by, and they keep walking, they keep seeing radish tops floating by, and they decide that this Lama is wasteful and they have nothing to learn from him.
I don't remember that one.
Is that right? Or?
I don't know. I'm not sure how they got to that conclusion either. But no, I think there was the story I'm thinking of is there was a part of Tibet where there was quite a food shortage. All they had was radishes, so they had to feed the kids. So whatever they do boiled radishes and baked radishes and radish pancakes and radish with radish and sliced fried radish. I mean, but it was all radish. So I think the message might have been that whichever way you sort of slice samsara, it's all suffering. So whichever way you look at this book, it's like it's all radishes. It's all about abandoning the 8 worldly dharmas, about giving up attachment.
Is that why radishes are part of the black food?
No, no. I think why radish is black food. It's kind of it has very strong vibration. It can affect your mind. Onions and radishes you're supposed to not eat. They're considered black foods. They affect your mind as well as your body. Like your I was talking about your last time your psychic channels and your winds and energies. I think it can kind of block your chakras.
Garlic too.
Garlic's a black food. Yeah, garlic too. Geshe Tsulga would never touch garlic. I don't think he ate onions either, did he? Definitely not garlic. I remember one time we were doing a puja, and I was sitting next to him and I'd been eating garlic. I said something. He said, "You've been eating garlic." So the lamas can be very sensitive. Smoking too. I remember Rinpoche tells a story here about the first time he went to the States. I think it was '74. They flew on Pan Am. In those days, you could still smoke in the plane. I mean, even there was non-smoking section, but still you couldn't escape it. And how he just felt like he was kind of in a sort of dark shadow, like almost like asleep the whole time. At Kopan, the monastery was on top of a hill, and his room was on the side on the second floor, and it was sort of fairly steep all the way down. But even at the bottom of the hill, if the Nepalis or Westerners, I guess, anyone was smoking, even from there he could still feel he was very sensitive even to the cigarette smoke of someone quite a long way away. So I think those black foods, they affect your mind through affecting your body more strongly than other foods, I guess. Meat, eggs. These foods have some kind of negative vibration. So,
is that a reason not to eat them for us?
well, sure. Especially when we take precepts, obviously, we sort of definitely don't eat them on the days we've taken the 8 precepts. You taken the 8 Mahayana precepts? Yeah. I don't know that we're such advanced practitioners that it makes much difference to us at our level, to be honest. I think you have to judge for yourself. Go without for a week and see if it improves your meditation, or I don't eat much radish, but I have onions and garlic sometimes. Of course, I have no meditation practice, so. So Rinpoche starts the book by saying, attachment to the happiness of this life is the cause of all our problems. So right there's a pretty good reason to abandon attachment, I guess. It's the cause of every individual person's problems, every family's problems, every country's problems, the cause of all the global problems. The basic problems facing young people, teenagers, middle-aged people, elderly people, every problem we can think of can be traced to this root, attachment to the happiness of this life. If we could read our own life story and remember all the pain we've gone through so many times in this life alone, it would be like a commentary on the shortcomings of desire, our attachment to sense pleasure. So the basic message of Buddhism is renunciation of the thought of the 8 worldly dharmas, the mind grasping at the 4 desirable objects and rejecting the 4 undesirable objects. The thought of the 8 worldly dharmas is a mind solely concerned with the happiness of this life, and any action done with this motivation, even if it's meditating or praying, becomes non-virtue, the cause of suffering. This is the very first thing we need to understand when we study Dharma. The very first thing we need to wake up to. Even in Tibetan monasteries, where monks and nuns gain so much Dharma knowledge through debating and memorizing thousands of root texts and commentaries on very profound subjects, they can still fail to discover this fundamental and crucial point. One of my friends who was a monk, studying at the dialectic school in Dharamsala, where they study the texts that the Geshe study in the monasteries. I'm not sure why it's set up as separate from the monasteries. Anyway, there's this dialectic school, Geshe, the first Western Geshe, George Dreyfus, who's a professor out in Williamstown, I think. Is it Williamstown? Is it Williams College at Western Mass? George Dreyfus, Swiss guy. He was a monk. He was the first Western Geshe. He studied there, and then the first woman Geshe ever in the history of Tibetan Buddhism, German Kelsang Wangmo. She got her Geshe degree last year, I think. I think she's in the States now. Is she coming here? Do we invite her here? Be interesting to invite her here. Anyway, so she studied at the dialectic school. So one of my friends was studying there, and he was coming out of a teaching with all the other monks teaching from the Dalai Lama, and there were a couple of monks. He overheard them talking in Tibetan, and these were sort of monks who'd been studying for a long time. And one of them said to the other, "That His Holiness just said this amazing thing." And his friend said, "What? What did he say?" He said that bad karma causes suffering and good karma causes happiness. Which was like, I think it's to this point, that you can study all these texts and not really kind of get the central point of Buddhism, which is, it's all your own fault, That's the central philosophy of Buddhism. It's all your own fault. When you blame other people or dogs, Anyway, so, that's the first chapter leads off like that. And then the second chapter starts, whether we're a Dharma practitioner or not, every problem in life comes from our own mind, as does every happiness. So the cause of suffering is not external, the cause of happiness is not external. The cause of what we experience is within us, in our mind. So what is that particular thing that creates every problem we experience in life? It's the dissatisfied mind of desire, the mind clinging to this life. We try to obtain the immediate happiness of this life through what are called the 8 worldly dharmas: desire for comfort, material things, good reputation and praise, and aversion to the lack of comfort and material things, a bad reputation and criticism or blame. So, as we see on page 16, where it lists the 8 worldly dharmas, craving for material possessions, craving to be free. Do you have a book? Do you have the book? Do you have the book?
I don't have a book.
You can borrow one.
I could get him one.
Yeah, get him one.
Thank you.
Just grab it off the shelf. What? Craving for material possessions, craving to be free from a lack of material possessions, craving for happiness and comfort, craving to be free from unhappiness and discomfort. Page 16. Craving for a good reputation, craving to be free from a bad reputation, craving for praise, craving to be free from criticism. Anyone else need one? Our worldwide audience? Buy this book. Keep the publisher fed and happy.
Do you find that this introduction to the nature of Buddhism, in the essence, is a good book for a beginner or not?
Which book?
This
book? Yes. I think, it may not be a very beginner's book. The thing is that, there are simpler introductions, like most of those free books, for example, out there, sort of a stage before this, I would say. But the thing is that if you have a sincere interest, in a way it doesn't matter which book you pick up, because if you don't understand it, then you're led to look for another book that will help you understand what you don't understand,
The 2 pages you read, very briefly, obviously, by the nature of the importance, the seriousness, not important, the seriousness of the nature of one's commitment to Dharma and to open the space of the suffering. Wouldn't you say that that transcends all religion, transcends all nature of the desire in the being to be a better person without looking for words that are different, like Dharma and bodhicitta and bodhicitta, what you call the motivation. I'm always looking at the nature of the motivation in every action internally, not just externally, or the way it comes at you if you're driving and somebody is coming at you, or you are shopping in the daily life, or you're making decisions by the nature of events, and so on and so forth. So the internal space is, those 2 pages transcend and tell what is.
Well, I think everybody's different. I mean, not everyone's going to have the same experience from reading those pages or the book. I mean, some people may read those think that's I've never heard such nonsense in my life, Of course, happiness comes from money and good friends and, nice food and stuff like that, I mean, most people probably actually think like that. Most people wouldn't accept that, happiness and suffering, the principal cause is in the mind, not in the conditions. And, everything, the whole society, the whole education system is set up completely opposite to this. So, I think it's going to be hard for most people to get, to be honest. So if it's so obvious to you, I think you're one of the fortunate few. I think if you, went out on the street and on a corner and started preaching this, people would think you're crazy, Well, people might think you're crazy doing that anyway, but so I don't think it's necessarily that obvious to most people. I think if not sure now, obviously, but if you read that, I think, I'd say from our own, that would make me think, well, want to find out more about the mind, how the mind is so important, much more important than external things, that might lead me to start to investigate that a little more, and of course Buddhism explains the nature of the mind better than anything that I've seen, and in fact, my first meditation course at Kopan with Lama Zopa Rinpoche, more than 40 years ago now. There are a lot of teachings that were very strange about past and future lives, or the 3 lower realms, and sort of stuff that isn't immediately accessible through the senses. But what helped me not turn my back on it was, one of the things that helped me not turn my back on it was teachings that Rinpoche gave during that course on the 51 mental factors, or the secondary minds. There are particularly the secondary minds, but particularly the 6 root delusions and the 20 secondary delusions. Because there, when all that was kind of laid out, it was like I was finally, being introduced to myself for the first time. Because Rinpoche would teach, and then the way the course was set up, he would give a teaching and we'd meditate on the teaching. He'd give another teaching and we'd meditate like that. So it wasn't just collecting information, it was actually processing it and analysing it and thinking about it and using the Dharma as it's supposed to be used, which is as a mirror for your own mind, So you should see ourselves reflected in the teachings. Because the teachings are, as Lama Yeshe often said, the teachings are not about, the Buddha, they're not about some being in the sky, they're about you. They're about us. They're about our own mind. That's what the teachings are about. And so we should see ourselves reflected in the teachings. So when we're being taught about attachment and ignorance and pride and jealousy and all these other ramifications of those root delusions, it was like, wow, I felt that by explaining these things, Rinpoche knew me better than I knew myself, he was describing me, So, so it was that explanation about the mind that kind of really hooked me, I think. At least got me to stay there and look into it more deeply, So I think everyone's going to have a different reaction to those initial paragraphs. But and for some it might be obvious and they'll go on to something even more advanced quickly. Others may think, well, they start reading more basic books. This, a word from the sponsor here. This is the second book in a series of books of, as it says, of Lama Zopa Rinpoche's commentaries on the Lamrim. So, and this book and the other ones in the series, which the next one is coming out next month on the perfect human rebirth, a book, also a book that gets maybe a topic that gets 10 or 20 pages in Liberation in the Palm of Your Hand. Is a perfect human rebirth. It'll be a book the size of this. And then the subsequent books on three lower realms, impermanence and death, three lower realms, refuge, karma, middle scope, bodhicitta. There's another emptiness book coming out, actually that's coming out quite soon. It'll be 400 or 500 pages of Rinpoche's teachings on emptiness. So this Lamrim series, these in-depth commentaries which are drawn from the 40 years of teachings on the Lamrim that Lama Zopa Rinpoche has been giving to us, they're aimed at serious practitioners, people who want to study the Lamrim in order to meditate on it and gain realizations, and also people who are teaching the Lamrim as a resource for people who are teaching Lamrim to others, so that they have the ultimate Lamrim commentary that they can background themselves on, if you can use background as a verb, and use it as a source of knowledge to share with others. Comment? You said something?
Did you meet Lama? This Lama?
Yes.
Yes?
Yes.
You studied with him?
Yeah, I still do.
Are you still alive?
Yeah. He was here last year.
I haven't met him.
Did you come to the dialogue?
Yes.
So he was there.
In the tent?
Yeah, he was on the stage.
Uh-huh.
And then he came here the next day and gave a talk to all of us.
Oh, no, I didn't.
Yeah. Well, hopefully he'll be back.
Did you say this is the second book?
Yeah, the first one was Heart of the Path, teaching on Guru devotion. That wasn't actually, we hadn't quite conceived the series at that point, but it was kind of like the Dalai Lamas. The first Dalai Lama was actually the third. But then they recognized his previous two incarnations So I said, sorry, Sonam Gyatso, you're not the first, you're the third. There was... So, you know, with past and future lives and past and future books, you're allowed to do that. I don't think he minded being the third. It took a lot of pressure off, you know. Okay. He was actually appointed by Mongolian, I don't know if it was Genghis Khan or one of them, you know, because Gyatso comes from the Mongolian word. I think Dalai comes from the Mongolian word for ocean of wisdom, something like that. So Gyatso is Tibetan word for ocean.
And Lamrim, this is what?
Lamrim is the Tibetan word for... Lam means path and Rim means step. So the steps of the path, the stages of the path. Lamrim. Graduated path to enlightenment. Okay, so that was... So then the next chapter, the third chapter, starts with Chandrakoman's analogy about the cow. You know, the cow, it sees a small tuft, page 31, the cow that sees a small tuft of grass on the edge of a precipice and runs towards it thinking, you know, it's going, well, let me read it. A cow sees a small tuft of grass growing at the edge of a precipice and runs toward it thinking that if she can eat it, she'll be happy. Because of her attachment to the grass, she finishes up falling over the precipice, killing herself. Her attachment brings her suffering instead of the happiness she expected. Chandragoman said that wealthy beings, you know, us, seeking only the happiness of this life are just like the cow. Without seeing the danger that their attachment to pleasure conceals, they run toward it and fall down and die. So this example is incredible. Since we seek solely the happiness of this life and are attached only to that, everything we do becomes non-virtue, cause of suffering. Like the cow that falls over the precipice trying to get the happiness of the grass, we're totally cheated by attachment. Even though we're looking for happiness, our actions only result in rebirth in the lower realms. So when Pari Rinpoche was here recently, you know, he gave a commentary on this. Do you remember? Did anyone go to Pari Rinpoche, Dagri Rinpoche? So one of the things Rinpoche mentioned was that you know, it'd be good to read this text every day. So you know, and the centre made this nice little printed thing, so I think it's easy to do. I think it's an excellent idea. But anyway, here Lama Tsongkhapa talks about the purpose of generating renunciation. Without the complete intention definitely to be free from circling, there's no way to pacify attachment, seeking pleasurable effects in the ocean of circling. Also, by craving for cyclic existence, embodied beings are continuously bound. Therefore, at the very beginning, seek renunciation. So without having renunciation, the first of the three principal aspects of the path, then there's no way to be free from cyclic existence. No way to be free from attachment. And how to generate it? Freedom and endowments are difficult to find, and life has no time to spare. So there, right there in those two lines, there are two huge subjects. One is on perfect human rebirth, the next book in this series, and then the second, Life Has No Time to Spare, talking about impermanence and death, the next book in the series. So by gaining familiarity with this, attraction to the appearances of this life is reversed. So he's actually talking about renunciation in two parts. The first part is renouncing attraction to the happiness of this life, and then, as I mentioned before in the motivation, so if anything we do with attachment to the happiness of this life creates negative karma, cause of suffering. So if we don't want suffering, if we want to renounce suffering, which we all do, at least the suffering we recognize as suffering, then if we don't want that suffering is the result of the cause. So if you don't want the result, you just have to stop creating the cause. So renunciation really means renouncing the cause of suffering. If you just renounce the effect and keep creating the cause, it's pointless. So the least positive karma we can create is, okay, I'm not doing anything for this life, that creates negative karma. I'll create, I'll do it in order to be happy in the next life, in order to get a good future, get a good rebirth, to avoid being reborn in the lower realms. So that is definitely practicing Dharma. It's a Dharma action, because Dharma action is one done for future lives, not for this life. But it's still a limited result, because as we know, like in this life, this is a good result. This was the result of our having created merit in previous lives, our having practiced Dharma in previous lives. We're experiencing the result right now of our actually quite a lot of hard work that our previous lives have done to get us to this point. And again, that's another reason why it's such a disaster if we waste this life, because all that hard work is completely down the drain. If we just kind of, it's like, I saw a statistic somewhere that a lot of lottery winners are broke after 3 years or 5 years or something like that. You can win millions of dollars. It's unimaginable to me how you could be broke if you win like $100 million or 10 million or 1 million even, But anyway, that's bad enough. But wasting this life is far, far worse than that, Because having this life, it's a lot harder to have this life as perfect human rebirth than to win the lottery. We think how hard it is to win the lottery. We've won the lottery. This is it. This is the prize. We shouldn't fritter it away, We should invest it for the future, I'm thinking, say, we should be the Warren Buffetts of Dharma, but I'm not quite sure if that's right. Anyway, so we should, not waste this life. But even a better future life is limited, because like this life, it's going to finish, we're going to die, and we're not guaranteed at this point that there's no guarantee that we won't be born in the lower realms when we die. So, and life has no time to spare, means that we're constantly approaching death. That's where we're going. From the moment we were conceived, that's where we've been going. We call it living, but we're actually dying. And we don't know when we're going to die. So, no. Death. The definition of death is a mind separating from the body.
On the physicality, but don't we every day die and live as the atoms are completing themselves from one cycle to another? I mean, really.
No, I'm sorry. That's what impermanence is. It's constant, not just from day to day. It's from moment to moment. If you interpret it that way,
right.
That's not death. That's impermanence. Death, in the conventional use of the word, is when, not quite conventional, in the Buddhist use of the word, death means when the mind separates from the body And when the mind, when it enters the next life, another body, that's the beginning of that life, and when it separates from that body, that's death. I mean, that's the way the word is used. If you want to interpret it in a different way, if it's useful, that's fine, you know. But we have to understand when we say death, what we're talking about. When we're talking about the mind, this life's mind separating from this life's body. So there's no time to waste, because we don't know when we're going to die. It could be, 12 o'clock or before. So by gaining familiarity with this, attraction to the appearances of this life is reversed. So then by thinking over and over again that actions and their effects are unbetraying, that means karma is certain, like the monk realized, or the Dalai Lama said, bad karma brings suffering, good karma brings happiness. So action, cause and effect is unbetraying. He's 100% sure. There's never, good karma never brought suffering, bad karma never brought happiness. That's the law of the universe. So if we become convinced of that, then and repeatedly contemplating the miseries of cyclic existence, understanding that negative karma definitely brings suffering, and by getting a deeper and deeper and deeper understanding of the kinds of suffering that cyclic existence contains, and now we don't have to meditate to do that, you just have to go on YouTube. Attraction to the appearance of future lives is reversed. So we can see that as long as we're in cyclic existence, we're going to have experienced all different kinds of sufferings. So that just aiming for a better future life also isn't enough, because renunciation isn't just a renunciation of suffering of this life. This renunciation is the renunciation of the whole of cyclic existence, the good and the bad. So it's also, and the harder part is, it's easy to renounce suffering of hunger, thirst, pain, old age, death, illness, all those obvious things. It's harder to renounce what seems to be happiness, the pleasures of this life, all the things that we strive for, all the things we're educated to try and obtain, we have to renounce it all. Not so much the result, but the attachment to it. That's what the eight worldly dharmas is. All of them, what the eight worldly dharmas is craving for this, craving to be free from a lack of material possessions. It's the craving, it's the attachment, the desire. So like the Buddha said, if you desire all happiness, abandon all desire. So then the clever people say, oh, but you always say, Dharma always says you should desire enlightenment. So shouldn't we abandon our desire for enlightenment? So well, ultimately, maybe yes, but we don't get rid of desire overnight, but at least we can transfer our desire from useless things to useful things. We can transfer our desire to something that leads to freedom from desire, rather than, drinking salt water, trying to slake our thirst, So desire, freedom from desire is a path. It's not like an instantaneous thing. So if you say, oh, attachment is bad, but I'm attached to my guru, is that bad? Say, well, maybe ultimately yes, but in the short term maybe it's not a bad idea, better be attached to your guru than your wife, or husband, or whatever, or child.
Would equanimity be an example of non-desire?
What do you mean by equanimity?
I don't know. I guess I'm asking.
Asking what's equanimity, or
Yeah. Is that an example of not having desires?
yes.
Okay.
There's meditation we do in the well, we can do it any time, but the way the Lamrim, the stages of the path, is structured, that meditation comes before we start meditating to develop, to realize bodhicitta. Now, bodhicitta isn't something that you leave to later. Bodhicitta, like we did this morning, is something we try and generate in our life, in our mind, all the time, supposedly every moment. You know, it talks about freedom and endowment, which is the perfect human rebirth, the 8 freedoms and the 10 richnesses, as Lama Zopa Rinpoche calls them, the endowments, 10. So these are the 18 attributes of the perfect, not just human rebirth, the perfect human rebirth. Everyone familiar with that? Okay, you get the next book. Only 1 month to go. This is a perfect human rebirth, has 8 freedoms and 10 riches. This is the perfect situation in which to practice Dharma. Everything's there. Lost my thread. What was I talking about? Oh yeah, equanimity. So the way the path is structured anyway. Yeah, the meditation on bodhicitta. So now I remember. So in the perfect human rebirth, there are 3 ways in which the perfect human rebirth is useful. There's one, it's useful to attain temporal goals like happiness in future lives. It's useful for obtaining ultimate goals, such as liberation from psychic existence or enlightenment. And it's useful every moment, because every moment we can use this life to generate bodhicitta. We can eat with bodhicitta, we can sleep with bodhicitta, we can wash with bodhicitta, we can go to the toilet with bodhicitta. We can, in one of the other, in the free book out there called Bodhisattva Attitude, there's the whole thing is about making our life meaningful by practicing, by doing everything we do with bodhicitta. There are a lot of practical examples. How to think when you come into a room, when you go out of a room, when you get into your car, when you get out of your car, when you get up in the morning, when you go to sleep. Everything can be done with bodhicitta. That is making perfect human rebirth useful in the 3rd way, which is making it useful every single moment. So that's like, to use an old racing term, making every post a winner. Familiar with that term? Making every post a winner. You know what that means? Well, not that I condone horse racing anymore, but when the horses come round, which way do they race? This way, clockwise or anti-clockwise?
Counterclockwise.
Counterclockwise. In Sydney they do it clockwise. In Melbourne they do it counterclockwise. I don't know.
In Revere, they do it counterclockwise.
Yeah. In Sydney, people, Revere people are straight. Anyway, when the horse comes into the straight, you see the fence. It has posts. So if you get in front, you got to make every post a winner. Stay in front. So. So perfect human rebirth is like a horse race. You have to make every post a winner. Sorry. So if we're trying to attain Lamrim realizations, and Lama Zopa Rinpoche has started emphasizing fairly recently how, over the last 40 years, we've been studying, he's been giving all these teachings and we've been studying them, and people have done Geshe studies and they've studied all the profound texts and done a lot of things, but now really we need to focus on doing long retreats and meditating. Of course, as I've said many times, it's not enough just to say, oh, now I understand, now I need to meditate. Our minds need to be prepared for meditation, just like the ground needs to be prepared for sowing a crop. If you don't plough the field and make sure it's free of all the rocks and garbage and that it has all the right minerals and water and it's the right season and everything, if all those conditions are right and then you plant the crop, it'll be successful. If you plant at the wrong time or if the ground isn't prepared, then it won't grow or it'll grow very badly. So our mind's like that. We really need to prepare our mind through purification and creation of merit. And when our minds are prepared, then when we meditate, our meditation will bear fruit. So when we're ready to meditate on the path to enlightenment, we start at the beginning and we get realizations developed sequentially. With our guru devotion, and then perfect human rebirth, then impermanence and death, 3 lower realms, refuge, karma, just the way it's set up in like liberation in the palm of your hand. The way the teaching evolves, it's the way we meditate. So if we're following that method, when we get to we talk about the 3 scopes or the 3 levels of capability: the lower scope, the middle scope, and the great scope. You familiar with those? So the great scope is where we're starting to develop bodhicitta. So that before that we do the actual meditation on equilibrium or equanimity. So there what we're trying to equalize is generally it's like sentient beings. So normally we see sentient beings as friends, sentient beings we like, like people or cuddly puppies or something like that, Then beings we don't like people that we hate or who are our enemies for one reason or other, or maybe cockroaches or snakes or mosquitoes. I mean, there's some sentient beings we wouldn't think twice about killing. So those, and then the vast majority. It's generally equalizing friend, enemy, and stranger. So the way we look at all sentient beings, there's some we feel good about, some we feel bad about, and the vast majority we feel indifferent. We don't care. We sort of have a neutral feeling. Basically, for us, as far as I'm concerned, they don't exist. So those 3 distinctions are mistaken because they're not true. They're defined by an ignorant mind. Sentient beings are seen in those 3 ways by an ignorant mind, a mind that has ignorance, attachment, and aversion. The ignorance sees the vast majority of sentient beings as irrelevant, which they're not. We talked about that before, how all our past, present, future happiness comes from all sentient beings. They're all relevant. They're all kind. Attachment sees some sentient beings as close, and aversion sees some as far, or as to be rejected, or damaged, or hurt, or we like to see them suffer. So the equanimity, when we practice in that way, the object is sentient beings. We're trying to see sentient beings as equals. The way we see them, as friend, enemy, and stranger, is kind of a very narrow view. It's kind of very like a snapshot view of sentient beings in this moment, not even this whole life. So with equanimity meditation, we kind of step back and try and look at sentient beings and our relationship with them since beginningless time. It's see how the relationship is constantly changing, even in this life, but certainly from life to life. So, and seeing how all sentient beings have been our mother in the past. So we're not just trying to develop equanimity, we're actually trying to develop love and compassion for all sentient beings equally. Because from love and compassion comes great compassion, and from that comes bodhicitta, and from that comes enlightenment. So that's the way we have to cultivate our mind. So it starts with eliminating those distinctions of friend, enemy and stranger. So that's the equanimity we actually practice. But there's a previous equanimity, you're right. And as talked about in this book, and a lot of the yogis talk about equalizing the 8 worldly dharmas. So equalizing the 8 worldly dharmas means not being upset when things go badly, and not being elated when things go well. Being kind of cool. And not reactive, Delighted when the team wins and kind of depressed when the team loses. As, people get killed over that. So equalizing the 8 worldly dharmas is yes, right here on page 16, this quote from Nagarjuna. Gain, loss, happiness, unhappiness, fame, notoriety, praise and criticism. These 8 worldly dharmas are not objects of my mind. They're all the same to me. So that kind of equanimity, of not being controlled by attachment and aversion. Go.
Thank you. I guess a bit of a fear I would have with that would be, how do you not be attached to your daughter or your mother or somebody that's
Yeah.
I wouldn't want to be like,
Because
they come to talk to me, hug me, and I don't care.
No. It's not to bring them down. It's to bring the others up.
Okay.
And not, to have that love and attachment for a child, which I guess is maybe the strongest. I don't know. I don't have any kids. I have cats. That's good in it shows you, gives you a glimpse of the positive emotion that's possible for you to have. But I remember one of my friends coming to a meditation course at Copan, because after I got very excited by the whole thing when I got there, and I wrote to a lot of my friends and family and said, "This is amazing, you've got to come here," and some of them did, And I remember one of my friends coming out from a teaching by Lama Zopa said, Did he say I have to think of my mother the same as an ant?" And it was like, no, think of the ants the same as your mother, It's not the same thing. But in a long distant past life, I was a medical doctor. And one of the things that he says, you never treat your own family. So it's kind of the same thing, because your attachment, you're so close, you can't see the big picture, So you get someone else to treat family members if they're sick. You don't try and treat them yourself, because you're going to make the wrong. Your judgment isn't. So even there, they recognise attachment. Not that they use the term, but they see that attachment can cloud your judgment. So, how do you, Deborah is a mother and a deeply experienced Dharma practitioner. So how would you answer the attachment to your family? Not to that.
I think you explained it. Yeah, it is the most strong one, but you can be clouded by it. and again try to raise up your attitude to the other people closer to that.
See,
I like that idea.
Well, there's actually two things.
That's
See,
very
we call it love. It's not actually love. It's attachment that we feel towards our children or our family and things like that. There's a big difference between love and attachment. So, love is wanting others to be happy more than yourself. Now, we may feel that towards our children, I don't know. But attachment is me first. So, attachment is a mind that sees the object more beautiful or more positive or more attractive than it is in reality. So you see your daughter as more attractive, more beautiful, more deserving of things than other people's daughters. I venture to say, from my ignorance. But you see, that's a wrong view, because she's not more important than other daughters, actually. But to you, she appears that way. So, as good as it might be for your daughter, I don't know. It's not reality, because Deborah sees her daughter as much more important and beautiful than your daughter. She didn't even know you had a daughter. And that's wrong too. So, or a son, I mean, this is the view of attachment. This is not the view of reality. And seeing that other daughters are equally as important as yours doesn't diminish the importance of your daughter, doesn't diminish your responsibility, because no one else is going to look after your daughter as well as you are. But you can look after her much better if you don't have attachment. Because if you have attachment, that can also create problems maybe as they get older. I don't know. How old's your daughter? 8. Yeah, wait till she's 15, I don't know. She can tell you about that. But attachment doesn't allow us to look after our so-called loved ones better. It makes it harder, because attachment is very closely followed by anger or aversion. So, pardon? Expectations. Lama Yeshe used to say, expectation is one of the greatest causes of suffering. Because things aren't going to work out the way we want. Because why? Because of karma. Because actions and their effects are unbetraying. So your daughter's got her own karma. No matter what you want for her, she's at the mercy of that. And
that's a big one. It's a very big knot to appreciate and unwind within oneself of the grove of the imprint, if I understand from last class session, of the nature of the preceding thought. If you believe in karma, or you are invited to consider your own responsibility to all your action previous life, including the tremendous gift of being challenged without falling into the trap of what it looks from the Buddhist point of view of negativity, but to look at it as a step forward in your own spiritual fertile ground of the holy field. Like a rose, I suspect, would not come to the full bloom, and you would not enjoy its fragrance if you yourself had not gone through the thorns of that energy of the knot. But you are so caught in this karma by the nature of duality, I suspect. Yet, at the same time, it feels so unimportant in one hand.
Yes, I mean it's true that, and I think Ribush talks about that quite a bit here too. That our attachment leads us to expect certain results from certain actions, but our karma trumps that. That no matter what we hope or expect, it's the karma that's going to bring the result. And so that when we don't get the result we want, because we have craving to be free from that negative thing, we get very upset. So our life is up and down, up and down, up and down, up and down. And Lama Yeshe used to say we should look at dogs to see a sort of a graphic depiction of how we are actually, what we don't see. The dogs are up and down all the time, They're so happy, they're so depressed, they're so happy, it's just 100 times a day. So that's like the 8 worldly dharmas in action. And it's not just the dogs, it's us too, but somehow it's maybe a little more graphic in the dogs, So this is what we're trying to equalize, the 8 worldly dharmas. And so at the end of some of these chapters, there's a meditation on praise and criticism, which we're very susceptible to. Praise and criticism on page 29. So, you should read that and try and practice that meditation. And then on page 47 there's meditation on the nature of attachment. So again, read the description of that meditation and then try and practice it. Then the same thing on chapter 4 on page 63 is meditation on meditating on the 8 worldly dharmas and impermanence and death. And then there are meditations to abandon attachment on page 65. So as well as reading and trying to understand the subject, it's good to try and practice these meditations. So I'd ask you to do that. That's where you really get to use the teachings as a mirror for your mind, and where you can start to equalize the 8 worldly dharmas, and really begin to practice Dharma. Without meditating on the teachings, without meditating we don't really understand what our mind is and how it works. So when we do these meditations, it's good to sit, if you have a little altar, you clean your meditation place. It's good if it's done as a little bit of a ritual, that in your home you have your meditation place. If you have a separate room, that's perfect, but a lot of people don't have the luxury of a separate room. So at least a separate corner of your bedroom, or however your house is or place is. If you can have your meditation area where you have the cushion, maybe you have a little screen around it or something like that. You have a small altar with a picture of your teacher, with a Buddha, with a text, with a stupa. It's described in Liberation in the Palm of Your Hand in great detail about how to set up the session, So you make the place clean, you light some incense, you offer a light. So even just 3 or 4 minutes, tidying it up, making the offerings, water bowls, whatever you have there, whatever you have time for, at least a light and some incense, so you kind of, get in the mood. And then you do, if you like, you do 3 prostrations. You sit down, sit in the meditation posture, and then meditate on your breath for a few minutes, just to sort of to calm your mind. Then generate, check your motivation for doing it, make sure you're not doing it out of attachment. And attachment's very sneaky, so you've got to really also be very familiar with your mind, so that so that the the secret agent of attachment masquerading as a colleague isn't there, So then generating bodhicitta motivation in doing this meditation for the enlightenment of all sentient beings. And then do the meditation. It says useful on this one on page 83, a very useful meditation to do before going to bed and falling asleep is check up on each action you did during the day to see how many were done with pure motivation, how many done with thought of the worldly dharmas. So the famous Kadampa Geshis, these Geshis, these great practitioners who came from the tradition of Atisha and Domtomba, the founders of the Lamrim tradition in Tibet. Sometimes they would meditate with a pile of stones, white stones and black stones. So then when they'd check, they'd look back on their day, and for every action they did with negative mind, they'd add a black stone to the pile. For everyone they did with a pure motivation, they'd do a white stone. So you start off with a huge pile of black stones and very few white stones, if any. Then as your days, weeks, months, years, as your life progresses, the negative actions decrease and the positive ones increase. So they did it like that, So it's said. So, we don't necessarily have to have stones, we can just make a mental checklist. Check every action done from morning to night. Talking to others, drinking, eating, working, playing, watching television. Did I do anything at all with a pure motivation, the mind not expecting the comfort of this life? So check, So if you found positive action done with pure motivation, the mind renouncing this life, rejoice. Because rejoicing over the positive action strengthens the action and makes it easier to do positive actions in future. If you find negative actions, you don't get depressed, think how terrible, how bad I am. Just think, oh well, that was a mistake, recognize it as a mistake and just try and regret having done the mistake, but not feeling guilty or I'm a bad person or anything like that. Just recognize it as a mistake, not to be done again, that's all. So, like that. And then at the end, of the meditation, then again we dedicate the merit. Since we did the action with bodhicitta, then it was a positive action. We created positive karma. So in order to sort of protect that merit, that positive karma, from being destroyed by negative minds like anger or wrong views, things which are destructive to accumulated to undedicated merit, so then we dedicate the merit, so that kind of keeps it safe. Normally you'd say it's like putting money in the bank, but that's not so safe anymore, so we have to come up with a better one. It's like putting money under your mattress, maybe that's safer. No, I don't know. Anyway, we dedicate the merit to protect it from being destroyed. So gradually we accumulate merit like that. Anyway, so this is like an unbelievably incredible book, to be honest, and it really is, has amazing teachings in it and really gives us foundation for our whole study and practice of Dharma. So, I mean, for sitting here for 3 mornings going blah blah, I can't do it justice. So, you really need to study it and practice the meditations And if you can do them in a slightly formal way, like I just mentioned, you have a meditation area or special place in where you live, you know, and do it that way, it's probably more effective. So slowly we can, you know, develop. Any questions?
Lots of it.
I have a question. So sometimes we do actions, and even, especially if you're not a Buddhist or before you met Buddhism, or just to help others, some altruistic action, maybe, you know, giving money for charities. But if it's not, there's not the succeeding thought that I'm doing this to, you know, for liberation or enlightenment. Is it still, you know, fit into a positive action? Because it's not complete. It seems
Well,
like.
you know, actions aren't just like one thing. Actions have actually component parts. As you know, there's a motivation, there's the object, there's the action itself, and then there's the result. So if you're giving with a negative motivation, for example, you know, giving, people are watching, so maybe I better give a mind, seeing the person as self-existent, seeing myself as self-existent. There's no self-existence actually anywhere. And you see the whole thing as an interdependent, karmically driven situation, and neither good nor bad in itself. So I mean, depending on what's familiar to you in terms of your Dharma understanding, what the occasion demands, the space you're in when you're confronted with a situation. There's so many different factors. There are a lot of ways to think about it, but not to get angry is the first thing, to have loving kindness and think, oh, that poor person must have such a suffering life. First of all, that person is like that because of that person's karma. So that person is like an instrument of a previously created karma, and a person must have quite a difficult life because nobody wants to be friends with that person, because most people see that person as annoying. Maybe if you're really good, you can even become a friend of that person. Maybe that's too much to ask, but I mean, there are a lot of Atisha, the great Atisha who came and re-established pure Buddhism in Tibet, and wrote the first Lamrim text. He had this really obnoxious cook who was really, nobody liked the cook, and everybody kept, telling Atisha, get rid of that cook. He's so annoying. He's so angry and unpleasant. Why don't you get rid of him? Get someone a little chill. And Atisha was like, don't disparage my cook. It was through him I perfected the practice of patience. So maybe we all need to keep an annoying person around. Sometimes it's called husband or wife, but if we're only surrounded by nice people, we'll never perfect the control of anger and perfection of patience. We need to have an annoying person around, sometimes called child. So this is in praise of annoying people. Do you have a question?
Yes, I actually have a couple of questions. Maybe I'll just say the first one because it's quick. Lama Zopa mentions an autobiography of Milarepa in here, and I'm wondering, does the center have a copy of it?
I'm sure. There's the first translation that was existent when we all got involved in Dharma 40 years ago by Evans Wentz, called Milarepa, Tibet's Great Yogi, something like that. Evans Wentz was a Christian scholar. He translated some Tibetan texts. He studied with the Lama in Darjeeling. And they translated some texts together. Evans Wentz, there's Tibetan Secret Yogas or something or other, and there's the Tibetan Book of the Dead. The first Tibetan Book of the Dead was by him. In Milarepa, there were 4 books that were around when I got involved, but they were quite a little strange, and they weren't. But that's all we had pretty much at those times, But then there's Lobsang Lalungpa, Tibetan Lama, who lived in Texas or down south somewhere, tragically got killed in a car accident 2 or 3 years ago. He published The Life and Teachings of Milarepa. So there's 2 or 3. I think we have them in the library.
In the library.
Yeah. Then there's the 100,000 Songs of Milarepa, which talks about his life and has a lot of his songs of realization. Published by Shambhala in a couple of volumes, I think, or maybe 1 volume. They've put it together now. I don't know if we have a copy of that in the library, but yeah, it's available.
The other question was, I don't know how this is going to come out, but I read, I don't remember where it is here in this text, but something to the effect of, even if we're practicing Dharma, capital D, and we think we are doing it properly, if we still have attachment to the 8 worldly dharmas, we're sort of creating negative karma or not doing we're not doing anything good.
No question there.
Right. So how even if we're practicing Dharma to the best of our ability, how do we know if we are practicing with attachment?
That's the whole
That's the
trick. I mean, it's like, but it's better to be practicing Dharma and trying to get better and to understand about attachment and be aware of it and be looking for it and doing these meditations and reviewing your day and seeing how many actions you did with attachment, how many you did without attachment, things like that, you know. Better to be doing that than think it's too hard, you know, not going to bother. I mean, it's better to be creating negative karma practicing Dharma than creating negative karma, you know, killing people or something, you know. I mean, because practicing Dharma with, you know, faulty motivations, you're still on the path on the way out, you know, and it's going to get better. That's, you know, like I said before, it's like nature of the mind is the more you do something, the better you get at it. The more you do negative karma, the better you get at creating negative karma. The more you practice Dharma, the better you get at it. So, okay, of course, none of us are free from attachment when we start, but by starting, we're setting ourselves on a path to getting better, to decreasing our attachment, and ultimately being free of it. So there's no other way to go. And you know, it's like vows. You know, people say, "Well, I can't take vows because I know I'm going to break them." So where can you go with that? So I'm not going to take vows. So you take vows knowing that you're going, okay, you're going to break them occasionally, but if you're going to wait to take vows until you're at the stage where you'll never break them, then you don't need them. If you're never going to break them, you don't need them. But you're not going to get there without taking them, actually. So it's like that. We're not going to, without an imperfect practice, we're not going to get to a perfect practice. We're going to wait to have a perfect practice before we start practicing. It's not going to happen. So, you know, you just have to accept the bad with the good and increase the good and decrease the bad. I mean, I think.
Where do you draw the line, and how do you know that you're not craving for happiness? Like, as I was reading the chapters, I realized that I derive a lot of pleasure from taking a walk in the woods, and I love them, and it's something that really, really makes me happy. It's almost like a walking meditation that I do it, and it's my exercise, but it really makes me happy. At what point I can start thinking, this is craving for pleasure, or it's just...
Not necessarily, no. Like, I think Rinpoche says it's the object isn't the problem. Going for the walk, the chocolate, you know, the daughter. I mean, these things aren't the problem. It's the mind that's the problem, really. So you can keep doing these things, you know. To abandon attachment to your daughter, you don't get rid of the daughter, you get rid of the attachment. So you can keep doing your walking. I mean, that's good. But, you know, as Rinpoche explains in that book, The Bodhisattva Attitude, there are so many things you can do with that. You know, first you go with your walk, you think, it looks like I'm walking. Actually, I'm actually treading the path to enlightenment. And as you're walking, just imagine that you're leading all sentient beings behind you. You're leading them, and you're walking through the woods. It looks like you're walking through the woods. Actually, you're walking on the path to enlightenment, and you're leading all sentient beings behind you. You can get even more enjoyment that way. So you have your regular enjoyment, plus the knowledge that you're actually making this walk a process of leading all sentient beings to enlightenment. And the happiness that you experience, you say, you're only experiencing that happiness. You're only experiencing that because of merit, a good karma you created before. So be aware of that. That's where the happiness isn't coming from the walk in the woods. The happiness, that's just a condition to ripen the seed of positive karma that you created before. Because other people have walked through that same path through those same woods and they've been miserable because they didn't have the good karma. It's the same path, the same woods, different mind. So it's not the walking in the woods. And, maybe if you do it enough times it won't bring the same result because you will have used up that karma. But if you do it with a positive mind like that, then you're just creating more positive karma. So it's only going to get better, and it becomes more meaningful. So there are a lot of ways of thinking about it. And so the thing is to make it a Dharma experience, not a worldly experience. So like that with whatever happiness we do, whether it's walking through the woods or swimming or playing music, or we can do it if we can make it a Dharma action through doing it with bodhicitta. And also the things you can think when you're walking through the woods, you can also think, or whatever you're doing, whoever sees, like we say at the beginning of these books, it says, may whoever sees, touches, reads, remembers or talks or thinks about these books never be born in unfortunate circumstances, receive only rebirth, blah, 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 blah. So you can think, may whoever sees, talks to me as I'm walking through the woods, whoever sees me, whoever touches me, whoever thinks about me, whoever talks about me, may they never be reborn in unfortunate circumstances, receive only rebirth, situation conducive to perfect practice of Dharma, meet only perfect spiritual right. You can see this on the second page. So you can also pray like that your being out there may benefit others. Also there's a mantra you can say, Om Trazadangana Hum Hri Soha. You say it 7 times and you spit on the soles of your feet, so that any beings that you inadvertently crush, the ants or the insects, they get, so you through the power of that mantra in your prayer, they get reborn in the upper realms. So you can do that. You can also do that because you're walking around in the woods, you're probably going to kill a few sentient beings, even though it's not your intention. So you can get around that. Say, well, I better not walk in the woods, I might step on an ant. So no, you can actually benefit the ant. I remember asking Lama Zopa, so wouldn't it be better to say the mantra and spit on your feet and then walk around trying to kill as many ants as you can? Then he laughed and said, yeah, maybe you should get those big clown shoes like they wear in circuses with the huge ones, so you can kill. He says it doesn't work like that, So it's the inadvertent. So there are a lot of aspects of Dharma practice and things that you can bring into it. So it just makes your joyful walk in the woods even more joyful and more beneficial. So we can transform. This is the beauty of the perfect human rebirth. We can transform all our actions, even ordinary actions, with bodhicitta and make them every post a winner. Okay, so we're a bit over time. So can you do a brief dedication?
The short Thanksgiving monologue.
Yeah, you just do a few verses.
Okay, page 39 of the prayer book, please. The Thanksgiving monologue. Saji perki jujin metodran riravling ji de genpadi sangye jingdu mikte uwagi drokonam dak jingla churpa shu Jetson lame kutse rapten ching nam katren le chok chur ge padang lo santen pedro sum sa sum gi dro e mun sel tak tu ne gyo chi idam guru ratnam mandalakam niryatayami. Okay, page 43, the short long life prayer for His Holiness the Dalai Lama. In that snow mountain encircled land, source of every benefit and joy, may Lord Tenzing Gyatso Chenrezig remain in life till samsara's end. Page 49, the short long life prayer for Lama Zopa Rinpoche. You who uphold the subduer's moral way, who serve as the bountiful bearer of all, sustaining, preserving, and spreading Manjunath's victorious doctrine, who masterfully accomplishes magnificent prayers honoring the three jewels, Savior of myself and others, your disciples, please, please live long. Page 57, prayer of dedication. Through this virtue may I swiftly, having gained Guru Buddha's state, place each and every sentient being without exception in that state. Precious Supreme Bodhi Mind, may it where unborn arise, and where born never decline, but increase forevermore. Page 75, Mingsema. Mig se wei ter chen rezik, me kien be wambo jampelyan, gachen ke petsu yen song kapa, lo sandra pe jabla soade.
Okay. So I think this is available online, right? This prayer book, the Kurukulla website.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
The actual teacher will be back next week, so the suffering's over. And you know, pretty sure this series didn't do you much good, but helped me, so thank you very much.
Thank you, Nick.
Oh. I should be offering to Kurukulla Center. Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much. Totally undeserved, but anyway. Appreciate the thought. Thank you. Any other announcements? Or?
So if you're not on the email list, please do sign up, because we send out announcements on what's happening, and we have a big event coming up next week. The Ganden Tripa, who's head of the whole